The lawyer's voice was cold as titanium as he read the will. To my nephew, Daniel Morrison, I leave nothing. The recycled air hissed through the station vents as I stared at the holographic document. My family's centuries of wealth divided, among cousins I barely knew. Then I found the key hidden beneath the floor panel of an antique ship and realized my great-uncle's true legacy was far more dangerous than credits. Daniel sat motionless as the lawyer's hands moved through the holographic estate documents, dividing his great-uncle's empire into perfect legal segments. His cousins received operational mining stations, lucrative trade routes, controlling shares in 3 corporations. The polished titanium desk showed Daniel's reflection between each asset transfer, his face blank, hands limp in his lap. Station. Prima's environmental systems hummed louder as the proceedings continued. The artificial gravity plating seemed to increase its pull with each exclusion. Then came the bottom of the document. The lawyer's fingers hovered above the final paragraph. To my nephew Daniel Morrison, residing at... The man checked his notes. Gamma Quadrant Residence Hall, I leave nothing. A single anomalous sentence glowed in the hologram's footnotes. The most valuable things aren't always on legal documents. Bradley Morrison smirked as he accepted the physical deed to station. 7. Sliding the metal card into his inner pocket with a practiced flick of his wrist. The lawyer's datapad chirped its completion tone. A 2-note corporate jingle Daniel recognized from Terra Group commercials. The group dispersed without ceremony. But Daniel kept staring at the lawyer's abandoned display, at that last cryptic line floating in faded blue text. It didn't match Tobias's usual phrasing. His great-uncle had always been precise, legal to his core. The lawyer had already packed his briefcase when Daniel grabbed his wrist. Was there ever a previous version? The man blinked. All updates were submitted to probate 12 standard weeks before death. This was the sole filing. He pulled free, adjusting his cuff. I'm sorry for your situation. That night, Daniel bypassed 4 security checkpoints to reach Tobias's private hangar. The access code still worked. The old man had never removed him from the system. The airlock cycled with a hiss. Among the vintage spacecraft, something waited. The hangar's atmosphere clung to the back of Daniel's throat. Ozone and decades of stagnant oxygen. Rows of freighters loomed in the dim work lights, their hulls pocked with micrometeor scars from forgotten routes. Bradley slammed a boot into an empty fuel canister, sending it clanging across the deck plates. Waste of time, he muttered into his comlink. Inventory logs show these rust buckets haven't moved in 40 years. Daniel's fingers traced the carbon-scored plating of a Meridian-class vessel. Registry markers confirmed it was Tobias's first ship, the one that launched the Morrison trading empire. His palm pressed against an access panel near the cockpit egress. The metal gave slightly, then clicked open under his fingertips. Fresh tool marks lined the edges. The maintenance cavity beneath the floor plating was 3 centimeters deep. A brass key rested inside, its teeth still gleaming as if polished yesterday. When Daniel lifted it, the work lights caught strange glyphs etched along the shaft. His grip activated a biometric lock. A datapad hummed to life beneath the pilot's seat, displaying 2 words in Tobias's precise script. Daniel Morrison. The holographic cube that materialized showed a younger Tobias standing on a docking ramp. His arm wrapped around a Zalathi woman whose bioluminescent markings pulsed faint cobalt. Between them, a hybrid child gripped both their hands. The timestamp placed the recording 3 years before Daniel was born. Bradley's voice echoed from across the hangar. Found anything? His comlink buzzed with an incoming priority alert. Daniel snapped the panel shut as his cousin turned away to answer. The key burned against his palm. The datapad's final transmission contained coordinates to a deep orbital depository. No labels, no corporate affiliations. Just a set of numbers and the words, Celestial Harmony, flashing once before the display went dark. Daniel pocketed the key. For the first time since the reading of the will, he understood. Tobias hadn't forgotten him. He'd entrusted him with something the others couldn't be allowed to find. The quantum encryption fields of Station Secundus made Daniel's teeth vibrate. His retinal display flickered with interference patterns as he approached the vault door. Director Patterson stood, waiting, her Rigelian eyes unblinking. Her first words weren't recorded in any file. "Right on schedule," she said. "Tobias estimated your arrival window within 3 standard hours." The vault door had no corporate markings, just Tobias's personal sigil etched deep into the metal. An antique palm scanner gleamed beside it. Patterson didn't touch the controls. "Authorization codes remain verbal. You'll need to repeat them exactly." 90-year-old audio crackled from hidden speakers. Tobias's younger voice recited 12 syllables in old colonial trading dialect. Daniel matched each tone. The door unsealed with a hydraulic sigh, releasing air that smelled of ionized parchment and static. Inside, the vault lights activated in sequence. One wall held financial ledgers for Zalathi Prime's education trust funds dating back 53 years. Another displayed property deeds, Station 7's ownership documents stamped with Tobias's signature and a dual-species seal. Daniel didn't recognize. Patterson's fingers hovered over a black disc on the central pedestal. "This one's biometric." The moment Daniel touched it, a sealed recording activated. Tobias's voice filled the chamber, clearer than in the hangar hologram. "Meridian is my daughter." The custody transfer order materialized in Daniel's hands. Dated 2147, it granted full paternal rights to Tobias Morrison regarding one Meridian Star Waiver, age 6, mother Zalathi Nation citizen Tevali 7. His fingers left damp prints on the archival paper. Patterson steadied a trembling ledger shelf. Corporate mergers were fragile then. Human Zalathi unions. She adjusted her translator collar. "Let's say certain board members found the optics challenging." He paid 6 million credits to expunge public records. The final document changed everything. Station 7's deed bore 2 amendments, one transferring ownership to Bradley in the event of social or political complications, another automatically voiding that transfer upon Meridian's 35th birthday, last winter. The station had never legally been Bradley's. Daniel breathed stale vault air. Patterson handed him a comms frequency. "Your sister," she said, "lives in Zalathi Prime's western archipelago. Tobias visited quarterly as a cargo inspector." The director's expression softened for the first time. He docked at Pier 12 every time. Still has maintenance log showing extended repairs on non-existent hull damage. The vault door sealed behind them. In Daniel's pocket, the brass key warmed against his thigh. Celestial Harmony wasn't a place, it was a person. His last, living relative. Patterson's access card clicked against the console. The depository's security feed reset itself, erasing their visit from the logs. They'd never been there. Daniel checked his wrist display. The coordinates matched an island chain 3 light-years away. Transport departures showed 3 civilian shuttles leaving Secundus that afternoon. He boarded the second one. The flight attendant scanned his ticket without comment. Only when the cabin lights dimmed for warp did Daniel notice the tiny Zalathi script embossed on his seatback. Celestial. How many cruises? S. 2151. Tobias had prepared every step. The shuttle's observation window showed Station Secundus receding. Somewhere in its depths, the vault door sealed itself. Patterson would erase the access logs. Bradley still carried Station 7's deed in his breast pocket, unaware the document had self-nullified 7 months prior. Daniel opened the encrypted file Patterson had slipped him during boarding. A child's drawing filled the screen. A stick-figure man labeled Oompa T standing beside a bioluminescent girl under 3 suns. The file's metadata placed its creation date in 2153. Meridian had been 12 years old. The shuttle's warp drive engaged. Station Secundus vanished behind them. The in-flight display switched to destination data, Zalathi Prime, where someone named Starwaver was expecting him. Or wasn't. Tobias's voice echoed in memory. The most valuable things aren't always on legal documents. Zalathi Prime's equatorial interference storms scrambled the transmission signal. Daniel adjusted the gain on the terminal as the holoprojector stuttered. A three-dimensional figure resolved itself, taller than a human, with faint amber bioluminescence, tracing the ridges along her forearms. Meridian Starwaver's hologram flickered with each atmospheric disturbance. She held a sleeping infant against her shoulder, its own markings glowing a softer gold. I don't need his credits. Her translator pendant rendered the Zalathi words into crisp colonial standard, but the edge in her voice came through untouched. The infant's fingers twined around one of her dorsal tendrils. Daniel transferred the trust documents anyway. Education, funds locked until her eldest turned 18, housing allowances calculated for Zalathi Prime's floating archipelagos, medical coverage that included hybrid physiology specialists. The files scrolled between them in the air, their blue light clashing with Meridian's amber glow. At the mention of Station 7, her posture changed. The bioluminescent lines along her neck flared brighter. So they finally sent someone. The infant stirred as her grip tightened. Uncle T said it might happen. Daniel's finger hovered over the display controls. Uncle T? Meridian adjusted the child against her shoulder. Beneath her tunic, other small bioluminescent shapes moved. 3 more children peering from behind a partition. Her laughter came through the static, sharp and unamused. His idea of humor, cargo inspector uniforms, falsified docking logs, every 6 months like clockwork until the stroke. She glanced toward an unseen corner of her dwelling. Brought them preserved earth fruit, said it grew near his childhood home. The hologram panned slightly, revealing a shelf with 8 small metal cases, toy freighters, each painstakingly hand-painted. Daniel recognized the models. Tobias had kept identical ones in his office, though his had been displayed behind security. Glass. Meridian touched one of the tiny ships with a claw-tipped finger. Last visit he brought legal docs, made me memorize account numbers. Static washed over her image for 3 full seconds. When it cleared, her markings had dimmed. Thought he was being paranoid. Daniel opened the custody transfer file from the vault. The timestamp matched one of Tobias's maintenance visits logged at Station 7. A smaller hologram appeared beside Meridian, maybe 8 years old, clutching Tobias's hand on a Zalathi beach. The adult's face was blurred by motion, deliberately turned away from the recording drone. Only his sleeve was clear, the teal-gray fabric of a standardized cargo inspector's uniform. Meridian shut off the ancillary hologram with a swipe. Station 7 was his guilt offering. I told him to scrap it. Her eldest child, a girl of about 12 with humanoid features but Zalathi luminescence, stepped into frame. The resemblance to Tobias's youth portraits was undeniable. The transmission cut out for 12 seconds. When it resumed, Meridian was alone again. You're holding the account chip wrong. Daniel looked down. The brass key from the ship was indeed upside down in his hand. He always fumbled it too. For the first time, something like amusement colored her words. The Children's Trust. Move it to the Coalsack Bank. Their human-side relatives own too much stake in your current holder. Rain lashed the transmission dish outside her home. The hologram dissolved briefly into amber streaks. When it reformed, Meridian was holding up a data wafer. If you're really his blood, you'll know what this is. The image showed Tobias's old Meridian-class freighter, not in dry dock but in motion. A younger Meridian sat in the co-pilot's seat. Through the viewport, Station 7's skeletal framework was visible mid-construction. Daniel touched the control to freeze the image. That's 5 years before he officially broke ground. No permits, no corporate filings. Meridian's markings flashed once, bright enough to leave after images. First secret, there are others. She leaned closer to the pickup, her elongated pupils contracting. Your corporate records claim he built Station 7 for the water miners. Truth is, the first foundation pilings went down as anchor points. The hologram changed again. A submerged view of Zalathi Prime's ocean. Station 7's massive support struts descended into the depths, but not to bedrock. They terminated, at a series of interconnected pods, their surfaces studded with circular hatches. Refuge buoyancy tanks, Daniel said. Meridian muted the comm for 15 seconds. When audio returned, her voice was quieter. Uncle T never forgot where their profits came from. A new file appeared between them, an embargo-era shipping manifest from the Zalathi purges. Your family built its fortune hauling legal cargo through blockades. Some of us were inside those containers. The infant began to fuss. Meridian paced the length of her dwelling, bouncing the child gently. The hologram tracked her movement, revealing more details. A framed pressing of earth mango leaves, a human-style quilt with Morrison Trading's old logo stitched into the corner, a wall panel covered in children's sketches of a lanky human male labeled Uncle T. Daniel rotated the hologram slightly, catching a glimpse of Tobias's handwritten notes beneath one drawing. In the precise script he recognized from countless corporate memos, it read, "Happy 9th birthday. Next visit, I'll show you how. The thrust dampeners really work." Static took the transmission again. This time, when it cleared, Meridian was seated on what looked like repurposed freighter seating. The infant had fallen asleep against her chest. "You should go." She reached for the cutoff switch. "Your cousin's ships entered orbit 20 minutes ago." Daniel accessed the tracker Patterson had given him. Bradley's personal yacht was indeed circling Zalathi Prime's upper atmosphere, its transponder conveniently malfunctioning. Meridian cut the transmission before he could respond. The last thing he saw was the flicker of her bioluminescent markings as she turned away. His wrist comm buzzed. An encrypted channel opened automatically. Patterson's voice came through, tight with urgency. "Station 7's onboard AI just triggered a dormant protocol. The entire structure is unlocking itself, physically unlocking. Every sealed compartment, every restricted deck." Daniel closed the connection to Zalathi Prime. The brass key in his hand went cold. His display pinged with an incoming file. No origin point, no encryption tag, just a single image. A Zalathi refugee camp from the Purge era, its inhabitants blurred but the Morrison Trading banners on nearby crates unmistakable. Tobias had built more than a station. He'd constructed an apology, one that was now unfolding in real time. The orbital boardroom's synchronized gravity generators hummed at precisely 1.03 Earth standard, calibrated to prevent drinks from floating but light enough to lessen fatigue during marathon negotiations. Daniel stood at the head of Tobias's obsidian conference table, 12 sets of Morrison eyes tracking his movements. The brass key from the Meridian-class ship rested against a data pad displaying Station 7's true ownership records. Bradley arrived, last, still wearing his flight suit from the aborted trip to Zalathi Prime. His boots left faint carbon scoring marks on the floor plating as he strode to his seat. The moment Daniel activated the holographic custody transfer document, Bradley's fist came down hard enough to trigger the table's impact dampeners. "That station's mine." He jabbed a finger at the floating deed, its dual-species seal now clearly visible. Tobias signed it over personally 3 years ago. Samantha Morrison Baines scrolled through Meridian's childhood hollows with methodical swipes. Her fingers paused on an image of the Zalathi hybrid child holding Tobias's hand near Station 7's skeletal framework. The date stamp placed it 17 years before official construction permits were filed. She zoomed in on Tobias's wristwatch, the same heirloom chronometer currently ticking inside Bradley's vault. Uncle William remained still in his chair at the table's midpoint. His attention never left the biometric verification scan confirming Meridian's genetic match to Tobias, 99.87% parental probability. The display also showed 4 additional profiles beneath it, each labeled Morrison Starwaver with declining match percentages. The youngest, aged 6 months, matched Tobias's markers at 23.4%, a great-grandniece. Bradley grabbed the floating hologram. "Zalathi genetic records are trash. Anyone could have—" William cleared his throat. The sound cut through the room with surgical precision. His gnarled hands, still bearing calluses from 40 years piloting early Morrison freighters, pressed, flat against the table. The room's acoustic baffling absorbed all other noise as he spoke. "If she's Tobias's blood," he said, staring at Bradley until the younger man dropped the hologram. "She's our blood." The climate control vent above Bradley, hissed slightly louder, adjusting for his elevated body temperature. His ocular implant flickered through security clearance overlays, rechecking Station 7's ownership status in real-time corporate databases. The results came back with a finality that drained the color from his face. Samantha rotated. Another holo. This one showing Tobias mid-laugh at a Zalathi beach, rumpled cargo inspector uniform unbuttoned at the collar. His arm encircled a teenage Meridian's shoulders. Neither looked at the recording drone. The image carried the effortless intimacy of 1,000 unposed moments. Daniel activated the last file from Patterson's vault. The boardroom lights dimmed automatically as Tobias's voice filled the chamber. Not the crisp corporate tones of his official communications, but the rough warmth of a man choosing each word with care. Meridian knows about STAT. The corridors of Station 7's original colony ship hadn't seen foot traffic in decades. Meridian's bioluminescence cast uneven amber pools on the walls as she moved through the derelict passageways. Her bare feet left faint impressions in the dust-coated plating, each step triggering the motion sensors that still powered emergency lighting. The air smelled of dormant electronics and aged insulation. This section of the station predated all the corporate retrofits. Its construction methods belonged to an era when colony ships were built to last centuries rather than turn profits. Near the engineering hub, her foot struck something metallic. The object skidded across the floor before coming to rest against a junction box. Meridian crouched, her markings pulsing brighter in the dimness. The rectangular casing turned out to be an old cargo log module, its surface pitted from years of neglect. She wiped the dust from the display with her sleeve. The screen flickered, then stabilized. The heading read, Morrison Supply Runs, 2129, in blocky, outdated font. Below it, a series of entries scrolled. Delivery manifests altered with handwritten additions. Medical supplies triple what the manifests listed. Oxygen tanks marked quarantine spec, and one telling line, 35 live cargo, acceptance by Captain Morrison only. Tobias's signature appeared beneath each entry. The module's internal storage contained more. Audio logs never transferred to corporate archives. Meridian played the first one. Static hissed for 3 seconds before a younger Tobias spoke, his voice lower in pitch but already precise. Purge Day 47. Delivered 12 more to the Leyton outpost. Zalathi quarantine officers are turning blind. Eyes. Bribes holding. There was a pause, the sound of someone shifting position. Samantha suspects. Says great-grandmother would have approved. Hearing Tobias reference a name she'd seen in the family records sent a shiver through Meridian. She played the next log. Purge Day 89. Found great-grandmother's smuggling compartments today behind bulkhead 12F. Still stocked with antique biosuits. Used one to evacuate a clinical researcher. 32nd anniversary of her last documented run. Meridian rose, moving toward the bulkhead mentioned in the recording. The colony ship's original sections were laid out differently than corporate schematics showed. The access panel resisted at first, its hinges stiff with disuse. When it gave, the compartment behind it exhaled 63 years of trapped air. Rows of ancient biosuits hung on hooks, their filtration units obsolete by modern standards but intact. Beneath them rested a metal box. Inside the box lay 3 objects. The first was another log module, this one covered in Zalathi script. The second was a Morrison trading pin identical to the one William had shown Bradley. The third stopped Meridian's breath, a sheaf of fragile paper covered in meticulous handwriting. The date on the first page placed it at 2112, decades before the purge. The writer described supplying antibiotics to a mixed species colony under blockade. Not Tobias's hand, someone earlier. Meridian read aloud, her translator rendering the archaic turns of phrase into something comprehensible. The administrators call it smuggling. I call it remembering. That boy at Docking Bay 3 with the broken tendril reminded me too sharply of Jeremiah. The name connected. Jeremiah Morrison, Tobias's grandfather, had died in a docking accident years before the purge. She turned the page carefully. The next entry detailed how the writer had repurposed a stateroom into a makeshift clinic. The human fever behaves differently in Zalathi children. Their luminescence dims before the rash appears. A practical observation followed by cramped notes about dosage adjustments. The entry ended with, "Jeremiah would have figured it faster. He always knew how things interconnected." Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Daniel appeared at the junction, his wrist display casting blue light over the old bulkhead. He stopped. When he saw the open compartment, Meridian held up the papers without speaking. Daniel took them gently, his fingers careful on the brittle edges. He read silently for a moment before looking up. Great-grandmother Eleanor ran half the early supply routes. He touched a particular passage. You can see where she's listing names. Meridian moved closer. The names were half Zalathi, half human, all children she realized, listed with symptoms and recovery dates. The log module from the compartment started playing suddenly, its aging circuits deciding now was the time. A woman's voice filled the passageway, clear, measured, resigned. "If you're hearing this, the rot's set in again. Tell my boys the compartments are still stocked, the route's still viable. Tell them the Zalathi naming rights come first when the fever breaks." The recording cut abruptly. Daniel was still holding the papers when Station 7's AI announced system-wide diagnostics commencing. The ship around them shuddered once, then settled as decades-old mechanisms activated. From deeper in the colony, ship came a series of metallic groans, hidden bulkheads disengaging. The twin set of their wrist displays mapped the changes in real time. New corridors appeared in the schematics, leading to spaces no corporate survey had ever recorded. Meridian's gaze went to the old biosuits, then back to the papers. "They were doing this before the purge." Daniel nodded. He ran a hand along the inside edge of the compartment, feeling the notches where generations of Morrisons had scraped tools during hurried repacking. "Not just during," he said. "All along." The revelation settled between them like the dust Meridian's footsteps had disturbed. Somewhere in the station's newly revealed sections, an archived comm channel crackled to life, broadcasting Zalathi, naming chants from 2129. The Morrisons hadn't just forgotten. They'd been made to forget, paper trails buried, inconvenient heroes omitted from the official histories. But the old colony ship remembered. Its walls retained the proof in forgotten compartments and carefully altered manifests. Meridians. Bioluminescence caught the Morrison pin inside the box, making its scratched surface glint. She handed it to Daniel. "I think this belongs to you now." He turned it over in his palm, feeling the weight of history it carried. Somewhere beyond the aging bulkheads, Station 7 continued transforming, its hidden halves unfurling like time-lost memories. Daniel clipped the pin to his collar. It sat precisely where Tobias's uniform cameras had always shown his. Meridian's fingertips hovered over the ancient medical notes, the treatment schedules, the observations about cross-species physiology. They were rough precursors to the modern data walls of Zalathi clinics. Beneath the last clinical entry, Eleanor had written something else. Would do again. 3 words linking centuries of choices. The colony ship's lighting flickered once, then stabilized at full intensity as the restored power grid routed energy to long-disused sectors. The motion sensors now illuminated the full length of the corridor, revealing hatch markings that hadn't been visible in decades. Daniel translated them aloud. E. Morrison. Supply Route Alpha. Meridian touched the lettering, her luminescence flaring. No maps showed these passages. No corporate permits authorized their use. But the grooves worn into the hatch frame spoke of constant passage. Someone had come this way often. The station AI's voice interrupted with a proximity alert. Bradley's engineering team had reached the outer airlock. Daniel sealed the compartment, leaving the biosuits and logs inside. He kept only the fragile papers and the pin. The corridor lights guided them toward the newly accessible sections, the ones Eleanor Morrison's codes had just unlocked. They found 20 stasis pods first, all empty but meticulously maintained. Then came the quarantine rooms with their outdated but functional equipment. Finally, at the terminus of the passageway, a single door marked with both human and Zalathi symbols for sanctuary. Inside, the walls were covered in child's drawings, some Human, some Zalathi, many blending the two. The dates stretched across 3 generations. Daniel studied a particular drawing signed by a 7-year-old Tobias. It depicted a woman with Zalathi markings standing beside a ship. The caption read, "Grandma's friend brings the special medicine." Meridian. Touched the edge of another drawing nearby, this one showing 2 stick figures, one tall with tendrils, one short with a cargo cap. Beneath it, smudged but legible, was the name Uncle T. Station 7 trembled again as more compartments came online. Somewhere beneath them, the refugee buoyancy tanks finished their activation sequence, their docking clamps extending for the first time in decades. The past wasn't just remembered here. It lived in the very bones of the station, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Bradley's voice came over the comm, sharp with disbelief. "What the hell is Deck 14? Meridian and Daniel exchanged glances. According to official records, Station 7 only had 13 decks. Deck 14 had been Eleanor Morrison's secret, one she'd carefully erased from all but the oldest construction logs. And now, like everything else, it had woken up. The hidden compartments and altered manifests weren't anomalies. They were tradition, broken rules passed down through generations of Morrisons who'd refused to let bureaucracy dictate morality. The papers in Daniel's hands proved it. The colony ship's resurfaced corridors confirmed it. All this time, they'd been asking the wrong question. It wasn't why Tobias had built this station. It was why everyone else had stopped building them. The twin ceremony Daniel watched through the observation glass as Meridian's shuttle streaked towards Zalathi Prime's upper atmosphere. The cargo hold carried Eleanor's medical logs, Tobias's personal recordings, and the Morrison pin, finally going home. The memorial beacon pulsed once outside, its light tracing Station 7's hull, before dissipating into space. The last coded message floated in its wake. Mission accomplished. William joined him, pressing a stone chip into the wall display. Eleanor's final log entry played, her old voice warm despite the static. Still no regrets. The footage showed her packing Zalathi poetry alongside medical supplies. Daniel exhaled. The ledgers had never mattered, only the hands that passed them.